UCLA uses a hand signal strong here. Probably just the play call is strong. Some clever action on 21 or pistol action. The play starts off with a pass or a ball screen on the wing and then a hand back to the point guard. Then the opposite wing dives for maybe a post-up opportunity with a side ball screen at the same time. Then after the ball screen is being used, it goes into Spain action. So it's a back screen on the ball screener. So here's the first option. You can see they throw it in, they have a little post up. They have the option for the post up there. If that action is denied, then they go right into the Spain action, which is a ball screen with a back screen on the ball screener's man. Wyoming used a clever counter out of 21 action. They faked the handoff and then set up this throwback after a timeout against Indiana. The play starts off what it looks like almost like the pistol pass ahead, but ends up the point guard keeping it. Then the player who comes off this fake handoff into this sort of double screen is going to come off for a three. So you see the player on the wing is going to curl inside. The player who came initially off of that is going to come off a throwback screen. Good action set up for a shooter. This is similar to what the Phoenix Suns would run a lot for Devin Booker in the NBA playoffs and after timeouts. Bryant ran some good counters out of Iverson looks, especially to start the second half against Wright State. You see them set up this lob really well. After the initial Iverson cut over the top, the player who's receiving the lob is going to set a ball screen and then sort of pick and pop. I love here how he flashes and shows his hands like he's going to get the ball, freezes the defense, and then the back screen is set up nicely for the lob. A common look for teams that face a big defending the ball. Some NCAA teams will prefer to put the big guarding the inbounder and then sort of switch 1 through 4 off of that to put a lot of pressure, or in a zone up situation where the team plays like a 2-3 zone or has the big who would be the next player guarding the ball. So you see as the ball gets inbounded here from St. Mary's with the big on the ball, they lift up and then look right back to the inbounder and go a little isolation. So basically creates an offensive advantage in ISO one-on-one attacking a big. Similar action when Auburn would play a big on the inbounder, Jacksonville State would inbound it and then have an isolation versus the 5. So this is for like a very specific example where if a big is guarding the inbounder and baseline out of bounds, teams will typically look to inbound it, lift up, and then throw it right back for like a corner ISO or attack and drive. One of my favorite series encounters was the Buckeye series from Louisville, initially from Ohio State, where they run a lot of great counters out of basic ball screen continuity and actions. This is a design slip for the big. You can see a flare screen here to start it off as an empty. It makes the big sort of sag off and react. A little bit of twist action. As a player hands the ball off, you can see the setup for the slip here. The first big slips it as the second one lifts back up. If the slip opportunity is not there, which is usually not if they run it 1 or 2 times, the slip ends up not being there. The second player follows into another ball screen, so it still ends up in a ball screen, and then typically a roll and replace or a secondary action after that. Indiana uses chin action to get a post touch, looking for a possible quick hitter, but mainly just a post up with a little bit of twirl action, as I would call it. They run the basic chin action with the player coming off of the back screen being the player who sets a screen, so a handoff with an exchange. And then on the reversal, the first initial back screen here from the player in the middle who they want to get posted up. A little bit of twirl action with that player coming off and setting another back screen right for that little post up. Possible quick hitter, but using a guard at a good angle, get a deep post touch. Miami Hurricanes ran a lot of 5 out, but especially delay action where they hit a player in the middle of the floor and then get to a second or third side. My favorite action was they would go in 5 out from a pin down into a handoff, which is normal like Chicago action, then have that player come right back off, flip it to the point guard, and then go square cut and leave a driving lane open. So get a little downhill drive, keep the 5 out spacing. Possibly the best play of the tournament comes from Arizona, where they run a little elevator decoy into a backdoor after a timeout down 3 against TCU. So you see this is set up basically by a quick screen down and then a pass. The point guard then cuts through and comes off a elevator screen as just straight decoy action, emptying out one side of the floor. That leaves space for the backdoor cut. A quick hitter from Wyoming, looking like a double drag in transition and then ending in a flare screen. I can't tell if this is a read or this is a design play, but it looked like it was designed for the flare action against Indiana late. You see the player setting up for a like double drag. This would be like an Oklahoma situation where the first player would receive a rescreen, but here the point guard intentionally rejects it and then it ends up in a flare screen for that first player for a 3. This is definitely a design backdoor play from Wright State. Starts off in like almost shuffle action or like out of the beeline chin series, the screen to screener stuff. A little bit of hook. The big keeps it. On the reversal here, it looks like a setup for maybe a little slice screen. Dribble at the corner, paint is empty. Great setup for the backdoor. New Mexico State runs what is a common Bill Self after timeout play, where they call a pressure double out of their pressure series. They run this out of like a horns elevator set. It starts off almost like a stack where the player gets freed up with a screen, look for a quick back door. The opposite big then sets a flare screen for the point guard. Then the wing who dove opposite then comes off through the elevator doors. Lots of action, pretty tough to guard, and a good setup. At the end of quarters, Duke went to this horn slip set after a timeout that got them basically open layups. You see it starts off in like a horns, both players the elbows and corners. The ball side corner then sprints through the elevator, allowing the slip to be open because of the aggressive scheme on the pin downs that teams typically play. So as Griffin comes off it here, you can see now 2 players run out on Griffin, blown switch, Banchero gets a layup. Another action here as against Texas Tech, same thing. Now they just slip Banchero into the post for a post up. This is probably my favorite set of the tournament coming from St. Mary's. They run this weave Spain action out of horns. Pretty complicated and also kind of sneaky and crafty how they set it up, and they were able to create a lot of advantages against Indiana, especially running this action. You see it starts off in horns with a ball screen and a pick and pop, then a dribble right back at the point guard, a handoff on the side, and then dribble at that wing. The opposite wing now becomes the back screener in the Spain action. So a handoff to that point guard cutting through, then a back screen for the ball screener's man with the player who cut through on the wing. Creighton ran a great spin backdoor set out of horns. You see them pass the ball to the elbow, dribble at the crowd, and then spin backdoor for the player in the corner. I love how they set this up with the player low. Watch 44 here really sell this action, clapping, showing hands like he's going to screen. Then all 3 players that are bunched together, dribble at them, open space, the backdoor cuts open. They also got a different variation off of this where it's just kind of regular stagger screen away, dribble at the stagger screen as the player lifts, then turn and find the player in the corner for that same spin backdoor action. Michigan ran good weave action out of horns with a couple of screens involved. So typical weave action is just like a handoff or like a backdoor into a handoff like we saw from St. Mary's. Michigan starts off in horns, players at the elbows, players in the corners. The point guard hits the elbow and then screens away for the corner. Then at the same time, the opposite big at the elbow screens down away. So the weave actions combined with screens, tougher to navigate, ending in a ball screen. Both USC and Vermont, needing quick hitting action down late, went to keep hammer plays. where basically you fake a handoff on the wing, then the opposite big low sets a hammer screen. Usually a trailing big sets a flare screen or a re-screen. You can see the flare screen here opening up for the 3 for USC. And then in Vermont, the big thing is they looked for the hammer. Nothing was really there. So then the throwback option became available. That's what a lot of teams will default to. As you can see them basically keeping this here, the hammer on the weak side, and a throwback screen on the strong side for a catch and shoot 3. Probably the most common set in the NCAA tournament was this kickback exit with shake action. UNC, Baylor, Boise State, a lot of teams ran this action where you just pass it back, then have a ball screen with a baseline exit screen on the same side. This creates shake action and forces the player on the single side to either tag the roll man or stay out on a shooter. This was pretty effective for UNC throughout the tournament. Pretty good screening for Baycott, allowing him to be the roll man, and then they would also just roll him into a post up off of this shake action as well if the initial screen wasn't there. Here UCLA switches in that, so they try to catch out the switching on the shake kick. So it's just a lot of options off of this. Pretty easy to run, a good touchback, and also kicking it back to that point guard like that allows him with not using a dribble, so not using a live dribble, so he's able to reject easier and to be able to make reads off the catch easier, jab setups and things like that. Villanova prefers to play out of their motion. One of the things that they do is like to swing the ball and get ball reversals side to side. They set this up with Miami action or handoff into a ball screen. See the handoff into a ball screen and a quick ball reversal. Now in this ball reversal, you get an exchange and a cutaway. Typically looking for catch and shoot 3s and then baseline drive opportunities, or be able to keep an advantage and keep their motion offense going. But this was a designed concept out of their offense where they just get a quick swing ball reversal, looking for a catch and shoot opportunity or looking for an attack or some way to create an advantage off of this main action. Another good set, and often run by UNC throughout this tournament, is Rams Spain, where they set a down screen for the big, and then that player sets a back screen. This down screen gets the big sagging off just a little bit out of position, and then the back screen on the big creates that confusion in Spain action. UNC ran this a lot, created a lot of good looks. It's tough action to guard if you've got a good shooter who can pick and pop. Michigan State ran good action out of what sets up almost like a diamond setup for a shooter, what I call rescreen action or Ricky. So it's Ricky Dribble, where the player comes off of that initial screen like a flare, and then it's a rescreen, so Ricky, and then a flip back to the point guard with a step up ball screen directly after it. So the dribble action is the handoff into the ball screen. And then they run a great counter off of it where it's a throwback, takes advantage of Duke's drop coverage. So here's the rescreen and then a hand back to the point guard, and then they go right into a throwback. The reason this works is because Mark Williams in this scenario is in drop coverage in the step-up screen. So as the hand back takes place, you see Williams is going to come over and be off the ball. Now this allows the throwback screen to be what we call naked or no defender at the level, so it's a clean look from 3. Bill Self in Kansas ran an absolutely gorgeous set with decoy action that I did not expect coming, but when they needed a bucket the most in the national championship game making their run, you can see them run this snap action or a throwback instead of a ball screen to the wing. And this is all fake and set up to be a designed ISO with a throwback. So McCormick is setting the throwback screen here as his man sags off in the paint, ends up getting 3 free throws out of it. Incredible action, and that decoy action to hit the throwback is just honestly brilliant. While Iowa is a motion-heavy team, when it gets late in the shot clock or later in games, they will go to a couple of their key sets. This is their spin punch set, where they set up a fake high ball screen. Keegan Murray seals his man low, and on this spin, gets deep post position with a weak side pin down, so it takes some of the help away, allows for an easier post opportunity. One of the more complex plays was actually a set stolen from initially I saw from Creighton a couple years ago, where they set this basically screen-to-screener throwback set from Arizona after a timeout. You see them starting off in stagger action with the player come the corner, curling on the inside, and then the player coming off and then handing it back into the step-up screen, then a back screen from the player who initially came off the corner, and then a down screen, so a throwback action, screen to screen or throwback. Initially saw this from Creighton, and then it trickled into the NBA for the Mavs and the Nuggets in the playoffs, and just overall just an incredible set, really clever and great design and action throughout this. Yale runs a good kind of decoy backdoor set here as well, similar to how Creighton set up their backdoor set. They run this out of through, so the point guard passes to the wing and then cuts through. As the ball is reversed, it goes into Chicago action, pinned down to a handoff. The big then lifts up for like a fake ball screen, dribble right at that wing. Great setup, great cut, paint's open for a backdoor layup. A good ball screen set that Gonzaga disguises with some weave action, gets Drew Timme and Chet Holmgren in a ball screen, elbow get action. You see the play just starts off with just basic weave action. Then Timme flashes to the elbow. And at the same time, the pass is made. Chet goes up into a ball screen, elbow, big to big ball screen, tough action to guard, and kind of creative look from the Gonzaga in the tournament. I love how this was all kind of set up with just basic action, and then it goes into a simple play that can be executed anytime. A lot of teams ran this zipper Miami shallow action, where Kansas has run this a lot the past few years. Of course, my good friend Jordan Sperber talks about this all the time as the most aesthetically pleasing play in college basketball. See, it comes off the zipper screen, then a little handoff, so Miami, and then a ball screen. And instead of Spain action, it's a shallow cut from the point guard cutting through. Creates a little bit of a different look and a different test for the defense to how they're going to actually defend that action, because it's not a ball screen. So is the big going to drop? Is the guard going to go through? Is he going to stay attached? It just adds a little bit more wrinkles to the defense and how they're actually defending each action. Nate Oates loves to get creative with some of his sets. Here he uses a common NBA concept, especially for like Chris Paul and the Clippers, if you think about that, where he posts up a guard and then has the big set a logo ball screen. So it starts off with a zipper, a post entry to the guard, and then the big up top goes and sets a deep post screen called a logo ball screen. In the NBA, there was logos at one time in these spots on the floor, so they call that a logo ball screen. Pretty creative action, something that college teams definitely don't see a lot of. But Chris Paul and Blake Griffin ran this a ton for the Clippers, and you'll see some clips where you can actually see like the logo on the actual court.